From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Fellow conspiracy realist, if you're hearing this the evening it publishes, let us be the first to welcome you to Monday, December 9th, 2024. It's the last month of this calendar, and oh man, so much stuff is happening. You know, I don't know if you guys heard, you know, the employment market is really tough these days, all around, but not just for employees. It turns out that it is tough for some employers as well, especially the intelligence agencies in Britain and Australia, who, for the life of them, cannot seem to hire enough spies.
Would you say it's hard out here for a pimp, Ben?
I'd say it's hard out here for a spook. Spook being, of course, old school tradecraft slang for people active in espionage and some way.
Oh, you know what, Ben? One of the podcasts I really like, The Watch, they just did an episode asking the question, are we in a new golden age of spy shows? And I think you and I would both probably argue, yes, being fans of Slow Horses. And I've been watching this show, this Taylor Sheridan show, Lioness, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's another one called, I think, The Agency or something like that with, oh gosh, what's the guy's name?
Gary Oldman?
No, Gary Oldman.
It could always be
It
Gary.
could. You never
He's
know.
really good.
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender,
There's
yes.
another new spy series with him in it. But for me, Lioness and Slow Horses, absolutely incredible. So yeah, it may be hard out there IRL for a spy, but they're really getting a lot of love in the fictional world.
And as we'll see later, that leads into an excellent bittersweet exploration of nostalgia. Shared a pretty scant link, but the discourse about this is great, just so everybody knows. It turns out that security folks and spy agencies in the Anglosphere overall are once again encountering an issue that we've talked about in the past, which is, you guys will remember a few years back, we had a little bit of hilarious schadenfreude when we noted that various U.S. intelligence agencies were falling behind in the cyber warfare game because all the good hackers smoke weed.
Exactly.
Remember that?
They had to walk it back, though, right? They said, you know what? We're going to give these hackers a pass. Let them have their weed. Let them eat their cake.
Yeah, they let it fade from the headlines, and then they bent the rules a little bit, which not all agencies can do. This story about spy shortages is pretty interesting. It's an ongoing thing, but it's just a mention because we have so much other stuff to get to. There was almost a coup in South Korea just yesterday for about 4 hours. There are asteroids that are going to end the world. Oxford, the boffins over there, have weighed in with some incredible new picks for word of the year, a favorite thing for us etymology fans. Somebody might ban chemtrails. There's so much stuff.
Finally, gosh, I mean, what's taking them so long?
We're going to cover all of these things and even more. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And we have returned. Before we get into bittersweet nostalgia, something on the mind of many of our fellow conspiracy realists hanging out on our Strange News segment tonight. We heard you, Facebook friends. We heard you, emailers. We heard you, people calling in with voicemail. All asking the same question: what's going on with these drones monitoring U.S. air bases in England? You guys heard about this, right?
No, sir.
Yeah, but I do not have answers. What have you found, Ben?
All right, here we go, guys. So drone incursions, by which we mean unidentified, clearly remotely piloted vehicles monitoring airspace and intruding into usually pretty secure airspace. This has occurred at 3 different U.S. air bases in the United Kingdom. With all due respect to the Empire, I still think British names for places are kind of funny. RAF Mildenhall, RAF Lakenheath, and RAF Feltwell, all between the space of just a few days, November 20th to 22nd, there were drones. They weren't committing aggressive actions, but they were definitely not supposed to be there, and no one is sure what is happening. We also know civilians have reported seeing, quote, triangle-shaped aerial vehicles that were noisy, had lights, and if you live near an Air Force base like this or any kind of military installation, let's be honest, you're used to seeing weird stuff in the sky.
Guys, don't you more and more feel like a lot of, maybe this is old beans here, but that a lot of reports of unidentified aerial phenomenon historically have been sightings of these types of technologies that the public was just not aware of yet?
Yeah, 100%. That's something that often happens. And then later, as the FOIA requests go through or voluntary declassification, we see that there's usually a man-made answer or a meteorological answer to a lot of things. We're not saying that all UAP are explained, because otherwise they would just be AP.
And I only say that just because of the triangular nature. That just seems to be, in a lot of those reports. And now we're starting to become more aware of this technology, that it exists and often is triangular.
But if we're talking about highly advanced classified aircraft that's being tested, we're probably, I'm imagining, not testing those aircraft in places where there are a ton of civilians around in a village nearby that can look up and go, oh, that's a big old triangle in the sky that's dark gray, and I can tell, I can hear the dang thing. You're probably not going to do that, right? You're going to have some kind of official craft that if someone calls in from the village, there's, you could have a response as that airbase and say, yes, there was a test, an operation, there was a whatever occurring last night, and everything's cool.
Yeah. That's why you want, if you are an extraterrestrial, that's why you want to aim for isolated trailer somewhere in the desert and wait till your audience is about 6 Miller Lights deep.
I was about to say.
and then you fly through and you help Saturday Night Live write another abduction sketch.
It's true.
Yes. I guess my only point is that's why the SR-71 was successful. That's why the spy plane, all the original U-2 and all those things were successful, because they did them in the desert, far, far away, where nobody could, call in the local police. At
a very high altitude as well, right? This is interesting. Let me add a 4th base that has been monitored, RAF Fairford in southwestern England. The Air Force itself has not identified who they believe to be behind the incursions, unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately. There have been some things on the path toward explanation, or at least elimination of sources. To your point, Matt, they do not believe these drones are operated by hobbyists, which is a fascinating statement because, as we'll recall, not too long ago, a Chinese student got busted in the United States for being a hobbyist who just happened to fly drones over one of the most sensitive military ports in the country.
Like a kite, just for fun.
Well, you know me, I mess around, you guys. Also, I'll take a one-way ticket home.
No problem. Thank you.
Please,
but in this case, you've got tons of witnesses, or at least a handful of witnesses, who are saying they're seeing these huge lights directly above controlled airspace, right? Like there are runways over here by these air bases, and that airspace is so controlled that if you did have a hobbyist over there, that person is going to get in trouble, like the example you just gave, and they're going to get caught.
Right. So what is the capability here? Now, drones they should be easy to track with this level of constant surveillance and scrutiny. So it is only logical to assume that some information is already known and has not been released to the public. Europe is very tense right now. and we do count the UK as part of Europe still, especially given, speculation that they're quietly spinning up for the possibility of a continent-wide conflict. And we know then a few other red strings before we move on, because this is an active investigation. We know a few other red strings, such as Lakenheath, the first base we mentioned, is home to the 48th Fighter Wing. This is what the U.S. Air Force itself describes as the foundation of its combat capability in Europe. We don't know how many DHL packages they receive each day. Just going to throw that one in there. So the question then, to your earlier point, Noel, about man-made technology being often the explanation behind these unidentified aerial phenomenon, it seems again that European authorities are quietly pointing to Russia, or they're quietly asking about Russian involvement or interest. If you happen to be a drone operator doing this, we'd love to hear from you. We'll do our best to preserve your anonymity unless you're an absolute villain, but we will not sentence you to death. That is something that is happening now to a property tycoon in Vietnam. I kid you not. I don't know how widely this story is spread in the West, but a 68-year-old property developer named Truong Mai Lan, pardon our Vietnamese pronunciation there, has been convicted earlier this year of ripping off the Saigon Commercial Bank, which is a very powerful financial institution. She has been sentenced to death for fraud, running to a total of $27 billion US.
Whoa.
Yeah, she appealed the verdict. The appeal was unsuccessful, and the Vietnamese court system cut her a deal. They said, look, Ms. Lan, if you give us $9 billion, then we will let you live.
We'll give you a pass. I mean, that's sort of like not a devil's bargain. What do you call that? A Sophie's choice? No, it's not even that. I mean, it's just sort of like an unwinnable proposition, right?
Yeah. I mean, because then also you're admitting to the crime.
So, and is the implication that this person just has 9 billion squirreled away?
Yes.
It is.
Well, yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Well, more that she has like
because they're just billion.
They're asking for 3/4, right?
Right.
Well, that seems like a pretty good deal then. If I were
3/4 of the 12 billion, they think she has somewhere, cough, cough, Switzerland. And it's confusing because the $27 billion fraud verdict is based also partially on the money lost by the Saigon Bank. The 12 billion is what they thought she took just as a vigorish. I don't know. It seems like a deal, and it might be strange for many of us outside of Vietnam to hear that kind of 11th hour execution offer. You know what I mean? Usually here in the United States, it's not as blatant. No one is saying, hey, we're going to execute you, or, just pay us.
We don't really execute people for financial crimes in the United States either, right?
No, they commit suicide in prison.
Also true. And just to be clear, Ben, this is billion US, correct?
Yeah, this is USD. We're giving you the US dollar equivalent. So for all the big fans of the American currency system, these are real billions. Walking down the street for that one. And speaking of money, I think we all saw it. There is a new gold rush that's happening. It's not happening here, but it's happening in China. And gentlemen, I will posit there may be a bit of a conspiracy afoot. Have we heard about the supergiant gold deposit?
Not yet.
Just a bit. I like the name already. Anything with super in front of it's got my attention.
Yeah, there we go. I also like it when people add mega to stuff.
Oh, gosh. Anyway. Like megafauna. Big fan.
Oh, yeah. Huge fan. Literally huge fans. And so this comes to us from our friend Harry Baker, writing for Live Science. Scientists in China have purportedly uncovered what they call a supergiant deposit of high-quality gold ore hidden near some of the existing gold mines in the country. This is if true, this is the largest single reservoir of gold left anywhere on Earth. It's worth billions of dollars. It was discovered by representatives from the Geological Bureau of Hunan Province. We're not exactly clear when they discovered it, but they went public on November 20th, and they said, look, we found more than 40 veins of gold. This is probably 300 metric tons, down to a depth of 2,000 meters. They used some smart LiDAR and some 3D mapping.
Scrooge McDuck would have a blast swimming around in that bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This would mean a couple of interesting things. But before we get to my favorite pet conspiracy theory for this, do you guys think the story is legit?
Oh, that's interesting. And maybe completely made up.
What would be the purpose there? Is it a destabilization effort? What do you think?
It's a pump. It's a pump and a dump.
A pump and a dump.
Pumping the price of gold, baby.
If you pump, you must dump.
Oh my God, because they're saying there might be 1,000 metric tons down there. And all of a sudden, the speculation that all this new gold's going to be hitting the system.
Flooding the market, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also, okay, so that's one of the two things. The second thing is that if you need to launder money or you need to, pass value in some form internationally, and you want to get around those pesky sanctions, especially if you got a good geopolitical buddy who is hard up for some scratch, then all of a sudden discovering this massive stockpile could be immensely advantageous. Just a coincidence, right? Like my old, one of my creepy old statistics professors said. I think we told this story on air before. This guy was such a badass. He sat us down and he said, look, this institution requires me to give you a minimum of 3 papers to show that you understand statistical models. Your real assignment is to, at any point in this course, prove to me a coincidence, and you will all fail. And he was right.
Can you prove a coincidence?
Right. Yeah. That's that was his one hand clapping moment. I think.
Just making sure I'm not missing something.
Very smart guy. Worked with DARPA on, again, creepy stuff. But here's what I'm thinking, guys. I'm thinking, 1, this deposit is real. I'm thinking, 2, the timing is tricky. The timing is convenient, let's say, because we'll get to China and a couple other stories later this week, but given the definite tension in the world right now, it is completely possible, again, logically, to have known about this deposit and waited for the right time to quote unquote find it to the world. And then also, this would collapse the gold market if it all came out at once.
Oh, yeah. This is fascinating. It makes me think of our brief discussion on tariffs a little while back and just some of the rhetoric around that stuff. And then China's announcement, I want to say very recently, about banning gallium, germanium,
and antimony.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it. It looks like antimony, like something you'd pay after a divorce. But
or the opposite of it.
But these are these are precious minerals that China exports like 48%, or the United States imports like 48% of them, right, from China. And if the US all of a sudden announces, hey, we found this huge deposit of germanium somewhere, I could see that as the same kind of political maneuvering you're talking about.
Well, whatever happened to that old conspiracy chestnut of like China has so much U.S. currency in reserve that if they released it, it would devalue the U.S. dollar to an alarming or catastrophic degree. This just reminds me of that type of maneuver. Did that prove to be true in some respect, or was that kind of a lot of horse pucky?
It is true in some respects. And you can see it not just in hard currency, but you can see it in, rare earth metals or minerals. You can also see it in, surprisingly, the pork industry, which will come up later this week. There's definitely a geopolitical standoff because China and the United States have financially and economically for some time been in a codependent, somewhat toxic relationship. To be honest, it's nuts. Maybe it's an episode in the future. We'll see how much gold they actually find or actually retrieve. We'll also maybe we'll get to the South Korean coup. For right now, before we go to a break, there is a surprisingly poignant story about orcas bringing back salmon hats. So stay tuned at the end when we do our CTAs. We'll give a brief shout out to that. In the meantime, let's pause for a word from our sponsors, and we'll return with more strange news.
And we have returned with some more strange news for your conspiracy-seeking ears. Got two fun ones today, I guess. I don't know. Let's start with, you teased both of these, Ben, but I'll start with the idea of outlawing chemtrails. This might,
finally.
Yeah, well, exactly. This might give you pause out there in conspiracy realist land because you're like, wait a minute, hasn't the existence of chemtrails almost entirely been debunked? And aren't they actually just contrails rather, from planes dumping fuel in emergency situations or vapor trails, etc. Right? Just can we get that out of the way here real quick, guys? What has become of the old chemtrails conspiracy theory?
Yeah, if the word debunked is sensitive for some people or sounds dismissive, let's use the lighter synonym explained. Chemtrails have been largely explained, or the things purported to have been chemtrails. We do know, as you can find in our book we made a while back, we do know that there is a grain of truth to the idea of widespread aerosol dispersion. However, the primary, the crux in the heart of a chemtrail conspiracy is that it's actively happening to poison the bodies or the minds of unknowing civilians. That appears to be the game of telephone.
There you go. Yes, thank you, Ben. Beautifully explained, and that is exactly my understanding as well. Well, it would seem that is not the understanding of a Republican state senator from Miami, Ileana Garcia, who recently filed a bill, SB 56, to repeal longstanding Florida statutes allowing for state-licensed cloud seeding and also, quote-unquote, artificial weather interference, other forms, and to ban any such, measures in the future. Okay, let's parse this a little bit. We do know that cloud seeding is very much real. It is a thing that has been practiced with varying degrees of success for a very long time, I believe since the 1950s. It's a way of shooting chemicals up into the clouds, I believe largely salt, in order to add moisture to create or reduce things like fog, snow, hail, and rain. We have also seen this kind of technology. I believe we saw it used in one of the Olympic opening ceremonies. Ben, was that in Beijing?
China.
Yeah, exactly. In order to create a spectacle, there was certainly some, chatter around that it was sort of a show of force or a show of an ability to do a thing greater than had been achieved prior. Make of that what you will. The United Arab Emirates has also used electricity in order to cause rainfall starting in 2021. Germany has also used technology involving infrared laser pulses as recently as 2010. So this is very interesting. Obviously, this comes in the wake of horrific disasters, weather-related disasters that have truly effed many parts of the country, including our fair state of Georgia, including parts of North Carolina, Asheville, Chimney Rock, places that were more or less wiped off of the map by the recent weather events. And as a result of that, there was a lot of chatter again about how this may well have been the result of weather tampering, weather modification technology that was perpetrated by the government for political reasons. I always was a little unclear as to why, the government would want to do something like this. Is it to create a need? I don't know. Can we talk about that real quick, guys? Do you have any thoughts? If we were to lend some credence to these conspiracy theories, why would a government want to enact this type of weather modification in order to absolutely screw over its own citizens? Is it to create a need? Is it to create a situation where there is panic and the government can then step in and do whatever they want? We're just thought experimenting here for a second, guys.
Well, there are several theories or reasonings behind it that I've seen. One is that it was something to the effect of weather modification was carried out by the United States via some kind of weird radar technology that I don't fully understand, to basically shape the way the storm formed and where the hurricanes ended up landing and dumping all of that water and causing all the havoc with the wind. And it was the purpose, at least that we discussed on this show, was to end up making that land unusable, making all of the buildings flattened to the point where an insurance payout for basically entire towns or entire areas and regions would be untenable. So the government would step in and say, we'll buy this instead.
Got it.
For pennies on the dollar.
Yep.
Exactly. And the reasoning behind that whole thing that is all speculation is that there's stuff underneath that land that was desirable for the U.S. Specifically, I can't remember exactly which mineral it was, but it was something very precious.
Yeah, like lithium, I think.
Yes, it was lithium.
Lithium was one. It's a shame it wasn't germanium or gallium.
Right.
Yeah. But the other reasoning, Noel, there was that it wasn't actually the United States government. It was another government somehow making use of U.S. technology or infrastructure to do the weather modification, or it was done by some other country to send hurricanes towards us. But again, we just have to say fully speculation, and it doesn't make sense personally to me.
No,
I like how straightforward it is as a plan. Yeah,
it is that straightforward kind of conspiracy evil, that just feels a little too on the nose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying this. What I love about this one as an enthusiast is the the idea that there's a cabal of hostile foreign powers. That part is true. That's not an opinion.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're steepling their fingers again, Monty Burns style, and they're saying, we could just bomb the place, and then someone turns around in a swivel chair and goes,
"What if?
Let's make it complicated.
Make it rain, baby." Yeah.
Well, hey, we didn't cause a hurricane, obviously. I mean, it is a little more easily denied.
It also feels like a good sort of Fall Guy type explanation for climate change not being real.
It's also that's a good point. It's also a great way to get votes from a specific demographic that will largely not be concerned about other policy that you want to put through. And I believe, Noel, this is a Miami state senator.
That's right.
Right? Yeah,
that's
okay.
Right. Miami
so not
State
one
Senator
of the big 50.
Ileana Garcia, State Bill 56. It would repeal more than a dozen pre-existing provisions on the books that do allow for some of this type of weather modification. It would prohibit the injection, release, or dispersion of any substance or apparatus into the atmosphere within Florida's borders, quote, for the express purpose of affecting the temperature, the weather, or the intensity of sunlight. And again, I'm not trying to completely clown this person, because we do know that this cloud seeding stuff does exist. But if you take a look at their social media presence, they do often reference things like chemtrails and the conspiracies relating to that. They do kind of seem to go in for some of these weather modification cabal type conspiracies. They even referenced a list that NOAA published, library catalog of 1,026 entries of weather modification. However, this list does exclusively contain references to instances of cloud seeding, that technology that is very old and tried and true.
Here's the thing. Here's the real quick to interject.
Sure,
here's something that we have to say, just a level set. This is, I don't want us to lose this line. This is important to remember. Shout out workaholics. The government of Florida does or has allowed for weather modification.
Right.
To your point, that might be surprising to a lot of people. But the second point, which is not being explored as often as it should, is the old concept of the tragedy of the commons. All weather in every part of the world is one small piece of a vast interrelated system. You cannot pull one string without creating tension or even breaking strings in other parts of the system that you may not see. You may not recognize the effects of futzing with this system for years, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think the cloud seeding stuff's bizarre, and any kind of these sort of playing God type chemical interventions, whatever, I'm always a little suspect of, for sure.
Mhm.
But what if there is a viable way to defend against an incoming hurricane or a system?
I love that idea. Like in Twister too, you know?
What if
Twisters.
there's a way? What if there's a way to prevent a storm from forming funnel clouds?
Breaking it up in some way, shooting it with something to cause it to disperse. Right.
I guess just what I mean is, should we humans not pursue
I think we should.
technologies?
It's a good point, Matt. It's such a good point.
It's being pursued. The issue is because specifically in the case of a hurricane, right, or a typhoon, depending on where you are in the world, specifically in that, they are caused by not one single factor. Mm-hmm. So you would have to mitigate for multiple factors, things like ocean temperature, right? That's one of the big boys.
Yes.
And then
that's what causes them to kind of spin up and really pick up steam.
Yeah, just so. And
literally.
You would also,
yeah. Sorry.
And, and you would also need to triangulate your approach vectors probably from several different locations, right? Because it's a problem to the humans when it hits land, right? When it hits human habitation, but the problem starts out in the ocean.
That's right.
There aren't a ton of humans. So you have to
lots
find
of
the
shipping
order.
lines.
Right. You'd have to find the order of operations.
Well, that's a really good point, Ben, and also something that is referenced in the Hollywood masterpiece Twisters, wherein it really shows that the prediction of these types of storms, there's a lot of kind of ghost whispering type of skills that go into it in terms of knowing what to look for, kind of seeing literally which way the wind is blowing, and it requires intuition in some ways more than it even requires science in the very early stages as to know which one's going to be the big one. And then which one to follow and which one to attack with this type of technology were it to exist.
And shout out to everybody who, I think we can say it now. I, too, was disappointed to learn that Twisters as a franchise is about natural disasters. I was hoping it was about the board game gone wrong, which I still think is a great film idea.
Oh, I think if it isn't out there, it absolutely should be, Ben. No question about it. It could also be about titty twisters, the weapon of bullies, middle school bullies, since time immemorial.
The trick is to learn to like it. That's what I found in all the
Matt.
Twisters I received.
I know. Okay. Really quick. Thank you, Matt. No, that's good. You give me some really beautiful visuals here, banging around in the old brain place. I got to say really quickly, though, I think this went on a little longer than I expected. It is a very interesting conversation. Sure. There is some, obviously some negative commentary coming from the left, folks describing these types of measures as absurd, alarmists, propagandistic, etc. But Matt and Ben, I really think you both brought up some very interesting points on both sides as to why this either should be explored further or there being these kind of seeds of truth in some of this kind of discussion of weather modification. But it does seem to be rhetoric that can be weaponized in pretty 100%. Gnarly ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, Noel, since we're doing a little bit of a thought experiment, let's say that I am the proud proprietor of an off-the-books kind of weather modification outfit.
Go on.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. I've got your interest.
You're talking like a turtleneck situation, a three-piece suit.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe even a gold chain.
Love it.
So let's say that this bill passes from our friend in the Miami State Senate, and Senator Garcia catches our boy out on his run and gun weather mod operation. What kind of trouble do you get into?
Oh, it's not much. It's actually kind of laughable in a way, especially if you consider who these fines and penalties would be aimed at. Each instance would count as a separate infraction. And I believe the penalty is up to 60 days in jail and a fine of up to $10,000, which, to be fair, is higher than the usual $500 a penalty associated with second-degree misdemeanors. This would be considered a second-degree misdemeanor. But again, we know when it comes down to it, corporations, whatever, the folks that would actually have the ability to do stuff like this, that is a drop in the bucket. What are they going to do? Fine the government? Like, who's the target of these fines? It does kind of confuse me a little bit there.
I think this is great and appreciate the information. I think all of us bootleg weather mod fans do.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like what I'll need to do in this, an essay, hypothetical situation.
Of course.
I think I'll need to hire an intern to take that 60-day fall.
Yes.
Secondly, need to make sure that the profit model is such that 10 grand is just a cost of doing business. Like when a bank gets busted.
Shrinkage,
Yeah, shrinkage. And then third, got to find a cool name. Suggestions welcome. Sky High.
Oh, sure. No. Right in. Let us know. Let's crowdsource this. Let's take it to the people. So again, this went on a little longer than I thought. Really love this conversation. I just want to end with just a reference to this other story. The Oxford University Press announced that the word of the year for 2024 is brain rot, which we have discussed at length here on the show, being the father of a 15, actually soon to be 16-year-old. Happy birthday, Eden. Kid. This is very real. And it's, actually the generation below my kid are the ones that are really caught up in this in a way that maybe isn't as ironic as my kid's generation. Oxford University Press defines brain rot as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as the result of overconsumption of material, now particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging. Including, and this is from a BuzzFeed article, something characterized as likely to lead to such deterioration. We're talking skibbity toilet. We're talking about rizzing in Ohio, getting rizzed up, what have you. All of these kind of bizarro terms that have kind of really shot to the forefront, even beyond just the niche world of Gen Alphas. Last year's word of the year to that effect was Riz. And the previous word of the year in 2022, some of these are kind of funny. I just want to read this list. Goblin mode. Some of these have kind of fallen out of prominence. 2021 makes sense, was Vax. 2020, they didn't choose a word. Weirdly,
there was a lot going on.
I think that's true. 2019 climate emergency. That is 2 words, to be fair, as is goblin mode. These feel like more like concepts than words. 2018 toxic. 27, toxic influence, a toxic person, whatever. 2017 is one I absolutely have not heard. I don't even remember what this is about. Youthquake. What is a youthquake, guys? Any idea?
Well, it's a former word of the year.
Apparently. I'm going to leave it at that. 2016, I do remember, and sort of still joked about today, post-truth. 2015 was actually an emoji, very innovative. The cry face laughy emoji. And 2014 was vape. So that I think we'll just leave it at that, guys. Brain rot. 2024 is word of the year. And I will just reference a couple of tweets that the BuzzFeed piece referenced that I think are very telling. I'll just do one to wrap it up here. And by the way, this piece was by Alana Valco over at the BuzzFeed staff. And a tweet here that I think sums it all up beautifully is this. From ex-user Joyce. I was on a walk at this nature reserve, and this crowd of 4th graders on a field trip passed by, and it was basically, dude, I'm going to crash out. Dude, no, don't crash out. You got to lock in. Dude, is that the bridge to Ohio? And yeah, so I think this is sadly and hilariously accurate. And just to wrap up, one last thing. So sorry, this is just too much good stuff here. A statement from Casper Grothwall, who's a very lovely Oxfordy British name, the president of Oxford Languages, said, brain rot speaks to one of the perceived dangers of virtual life and how we are using our free time. It feels like a rightful next chapter in the cultural conversation about humanity and technology. It's not surprising that so many voters embrace the term, endorsing it as our choice this year. I would not say these are good signposts for humanity and technology and the crossover thereof. But thanks, guys, for the little extra time. And we're going to take a quick pause, hear a word from our sponsor, and then come back with a little bit more strange news for you.
And we've returned. Guys, despite all the stair climbing I'm doing and the squats and working out, I found out that I have an anti-gyat, or a fleot, I think is how they also say that.
A peanut
okay.
butt? Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Can you explain what that is for the
No, I
audience?
can't, because I don't understand it. I just know that.
Yeah.
Can you spell it so people can look it up on their own?
Yeah.
No, I don't want people to look up.
Is it G-Y-A-T-T? Right?
Yes, but in this case, it's an F-L-Y-A-T-T.
Got it.
Fleot.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
to me.
hey, keep on squatting, Matt. You'll get there. You'll get there one day. You'll get
All
that
right.
shelf one of these days.
Yes. Okay. So first story, you guys. We're gonna go with a weird one. I've got two stories about death. Sorry, tend to do that sometimes, and then another one that there's like two stories at the end that are more future facing or looking up. Let's say. So the first one is about an ex-Kansas police detective who was charged with some pretty terrible things, and he was discovered this Monday, as we record on Wednesday, December 4th. He was discovered dead by apparent suicide in his home on the day a federal civil rights trial was to begin, where he was charged with sexually abusing several black women over several decades, and accused with starting some form of sex ring.
Yeah, I was hearing about this on our local NPR affiliate a little while back when the news broke. I think it was jury selection was at the point they were at. He was due to show up for jury selection.
Yeah, the reason why he was found is because he was supposed to be in court that day. He was allowed to stay at his home, like essentially under house arrest, as this trial was, beginning. And he was due in court, and he didn't show up. So there was a warrant to go and get him, and they discovered him there in his home. Let's go into some of these details. And we're getting this from NBC News. The title is Ex-Kansas Police Detective Found Dead on First Day of Federal Civil Rights Trial. It was written by Eric Ortiz and Michael Kosner, Kosnar. We'll just start here. An arrest warrant had been issued when Roger Golubsky, 71, failed to appear at a federal courthouse in Topeka, Kansas on the first day of jury selection. Law enforcement received a 911 call and responded to his home in Kansas. This is a place called Edwardsville. It's a suburb there. Police reported he had suffered a fatal gunshot wound, and there were no indications of foul play. Again, initially, nobody would say whether or not it was, if he had taken his life by his own hand, but
Right.
it's one of those situations where there are officials who make statements, but they won't tell you who they are. They're not going to go on record with it, but they'll tell you as a reporter, it appears to have been suicide.
An individual familiar with the case.
Exactly. Very, very similar writing there. So let's get into what he was charged with and why it's a big deal. He was charged in 2022 with federal civil rights crimes, accused of exploiting black women for sex and for framing people for crimes that they did not commit, or at least that the person who was accused of the crime and then went to jail for the crime, that person says they didn't do it. And this guy is at least accused and was accused of putting those people in jail when he knew that they were not actually the person who committed the crime.
Even to the point where that those false arrests or aiding and abetting that kind of crime and framing people would be weaponized or leveraged, right?
Yes.
To further abuse women.
Well, yeah, because he had basically, we have to continue on, but it appears that he had a criminal organization of sorts that he was at least somewhere involved in near the top, where he was, it's disgusting, selling women for sex for at least a period of time that was known to the investigation. So here we go. He retired in 2010 after 35 years with the Kansas City Police Department. He pleaded not guilty to 6 counts of deprivation of civil rights, and federal investigators said the case was related to the rape of a woman from 1998 to 2001 and another woman from 1999 to 2002 while he was while he was employed there with the Kansas City Police Department. And he was also charged with 3 others in a separate case for allegedly, and here it is, quote, running a sex trafficking ring from 1996 to 1998 that, quote, held women captive. So whatever that means, whatever the actual details are of that situation, it sounds horrifying.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who, retires, and then 14 years later, he's sitting at home on house arrest, getting regular dialysis treatments, facing life in prison if convicted. And he made the choice to take his own life rather than have to face the consequences in a public arena like that.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, Matt, for everybody listening, I want to go back to the 2 things you mentioned at the beginning of that. When we're saying that someone was sexually assaulted from X time to Y time, what we're saying is this was happening repeatedly.
Yes.
This is all horrific, unclean stuff. But just know, folks, we're not talking about one-off situations. When Matt's giving us that timeline, he's talking about abducting people, coercing them into sex work, very close to trafficking, especially with captivity involved.
Oh, yeah. A police officer abusing power like that is... Ben used the word unclean a lot, and I particularly like that when it comes to these kinds of situations. But in this case, with this guy, for that many years, like at least 3 separate times where there's stints of 2-3 years at a time of this kind of abuse. I can imagine why this person didn't want to go into court and hear all that evidence, presented and talked about in front of him, and all of these other human beings looking at him, and, the world stage looking at him.
Sure.
I can imagine that. The
dialysis in prison is also pretty close to a death sentence.
Yeah, probably not great. The tragic thing in this situation is that all of the victims, all the families of the victims, all the people who were affected by this man don't get that moment of clarity, that moment of like hearing it all coming to light and air it out and getting some kind of, I don't know what you get from that, but at least a tiny bit of feeling as though the truth came out, right?
Mm-hmm. Or people were held accountable.
Yes, somebody gets held accountable, and it's just spoken. It's something about the truth being spoken out loud. I can imagine that being a very helpful, positive thing, as hard as it may be in the moment. But they're never going to get that now because this guy's gone, and the trials are basically dropped, or it's just over. There's no defendant. There's no case. And
there's no one to prosecute.
Yep.
Well, be that as it may, I'm sure the investigations continue, or hope the investigations continue, into co-conspirators, into other people who may have aided in the pursuit of these crimes, because over this degree of time, over this long window of time, it is incredibly unlikely that someone, perhaps a colleague or a coworker, did not know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the one of the good things that's happening right now is that there are a bunch of other lawsuits coming up with regards to the Kansas City Police Department that have to do with some of this stuff. There's one attorney, Dania Diaz, I think is how you say her name. She's with Jay-Z's, I think they're called Team Rock or something like that.
Sure.
They've got a fairly large lawsuit going on about the entirety of the Kansas City Police Department, and basically accusing them of not giving records when they're supposed to be giving these records that have to do with corruption, that have to do with basically laws being violated within the police department. So hopefully that will be ongoing and will be something will happen.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, that's a terrible situation, you guys.
And it's an active conspiracy, too.
Yes. Second thing isn't really a conspiracy, isn't really anything that we need to worry about. It's a little mini nightmare scenario, maybe in my head, and I wanted to see if you guys share this or just what we think about it. I'll talk about the story first, then I'll give you the information to look it up. There's a woman named Elizabeth Pollard. She's 64 years old. Mm-hmm. She was out, at least according to her family, looking for her cat Pepper because she couldn't find her cat. Cute little cat named Pepper. I'll read part of this. Her car was found at a restaurant, parked at a restaurant. Inside her car was her granddaughter, a 5-year-old granddaughter. She was not found anywhere, Elizabeth. There began a hunt for Elizabeth. Where the heck did she go? Where is she? Why was her granddaughter alone in the car? She was out, it was known she was out looking for her cat.
Mm-hmm.
The people who were out looking for her found a manhole-sized opening that was a sinkhole that led down into a mine shaft, into like where there's known mine shafts. Mm-hmm. And it is believed that this woman was out looking for her cat pretty nearby to where her car was parked, and she ended up falling down into essentially a sinkhole, or a sinkhole opened up over this mine shaft as she's walking through the woods looking for her cat.
Oh, man.
A dark lottery.
Right?
Do you think that's where the cat was?
Well, who knows? In this case, it's not known whether she fell into a hole as she's looking around, maybe as it's getting dark, or if the sinkhole opened up as she's standing over top of it. It doesn't know. The authorities don't even know if she's in that hole. They're still searching for her. I think it's one of those unfortunate situations where the probable scenario is that she fell in somehow.
Right. Yeah, and sinkholes also can occur suddenly. They can run in packs. Like sinkholes can move deep. As you remember, perhaps when I lived in Central America for a time, sinkholes were simply a known part of what could happen at your house or when you're walking around. Luckily, happy to report I have not been involved in a fatal sinkhole situation, but there's not really a way for the average person to be super aware of this happening. If you're unlucky enough to be around when a sinkhole is occurring, when it's germinating, I'm using that word incorrectly for fun. When that happens, your odds of being able to physically run away or cling to something stable are pretty low.
Yeah.
I think usually it sounds like what happened is this formed before this distraught individual happened across it. And maybe they were running toward, like, trying to find their cat and not able to be entirely cognizant of the environment in which they're searching.
Maybe, but it's unknown. And especially because it is about the size of a manhole. So imagine that. That's like the size of like your torso plus a little bit, basically, right? And when you look at the hole, it looks like a patch of grass. And in the center, there's just a hole punched, and then it goes down 30 feet, like 9 meters. And, visualize 30 feet. That's pretty far to where you feel like you're just walking on flat land. And then almost a human-sized hole opens up and you just plop right through it.
It's deep enough to cause possibly death, depending on how you fall. But definitely it's deep enough to cause mobility-ending injuries, right? Like this can crack a femur, this can break a thigh.
Well, yeah. Especially if you imagine like it's essentially a bubble underneath there, right? And there's a tiny layer of earth above you. That tiny layer lets go, and then other parts of that earth collapse in on top of you as it collapses, and you essentially could be buried alive in that moment. Sorry, it's just a new nightmare kind of thing that's unlocked for me personally. I don't know about you guys.
I think it's for a lot of people,
Well, I feel it in my chest, I guess, when I think about it, because there's just all kinds of woods that I love to run around, and who knows what's underneath there. I don't have a geological survey that shows, any cave systems.
We haven't heard back from accounting yet either on our pitch to get a LiDAR device for each of us.
Everybody needs one.
Accounting, write us back.
Yeah. So this is another tragic situation. You can go to AP News and read the article, Search Extends into the Night for Pennsylvania Woman Who May Have Fallen into Sinkhole, written by Mike Scolforo, Scolforo. That was written December 3rd of this year as we record. Guys, we don't have much time to cover the asteroids, so this is what we'll put out there. You can look this up if you want to. Asteroid burns up before hitting Earth, creating fireball in the sky. This is written in USA Today by Eric Legata on December 4th, today as we record. This is a story about a very tiny, 70 centimeter roughly wide asteroid that hit the Earth. And it just, as it interacted with the atmosphere, as you've seen in movies, it just burned up and pretty much turned into nothing. 70 centimeters. That's like 27 and a half inches in diameter. Tiny. Not a big deal. The thing that is a big deal about it is that humans only knew that it was coming a couple of hours before it impacted.
Like predicting a natural disaster.
Exactly.
Like a tornado. Yeah.
And it's the thing that just happens, and it's not going to stop happening. And we're going to do our best as humanity to identify and categorize and understand the trajectory of all of these objects that are flying around us in orbit. And, we'll see what happens. One thing we always like to say is head on over to spaceweather.com or a similar source. You can see a giant list of the upcoming near-Earth asteroids that are known about.
That we know about.
Because this one was not on that list. I double-checked this morning.
I like to call it reservations versus walk-ins.
There you go.
There are unfortunately a lot of space walk-ins. Another source, you and I were both leaning on the excellent folks at Live Science here, Matt. I think Live Science comes up again at the end of this program.
Oh, yeah. There's Live Science. We'll jump to them really quickly. And here's another story that was published yesterday as we record. Massive, quote, potentially hazardous asteroid due to make closest ever approach to Earth tonight, and you can watch it live. This was written by Pandora Dewan yesterday.
That's an awesome name.
Yes, it is. I hope that's a real person and not like some program. This time, it's a stadium-sized asteroid named 2020 XR, and it is coming into the closest approach to Earth on record, and that is happening today as we record on December 4th. So, if something happens, it's too late as you're hearing this. It already happened. But it does appear that nothing is going to happen. It is just creepy to think about a stadium. Like if you just imagine, I don't know, a stadium. I don't know stadiums, guys. What's the Atlanta one? The football stadium?
Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, okay. Imagine Mercedes-Benz just like flying past Earth and you could look up and be like, hey, it's the Falcons. It's like that. But it's not as crazy. It is crazy to imagine it traveling 27,500 miles per hour. 27,500 miles per hour. Just can't even imagine it. It's going to reach a minimum distance of 1.37 million miles from Earth, which is its closest approach, but it is nowhere near close enough to impact us, at least according to the models. And that's what we'll rest easy on this week.
But you know who is close enough to impact us specifically? You, fellow conspiracy realists. Thank you, as always, so much for tuning in to our weekly Strange News segment. We have so much more we haven't gotten to. We can't wait for you to join us. We want to hear your reactions. We want to hear your hot takes. We want to hear your news stories that need more attention. Find us on emails, find us on telephone lines, and find us on online lines. We're going with onlines.
All the lines, all the ways, all the internet platforms of note, where you can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook, where we have our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, on X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have video content galore for your enjoyment and pleasure. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We also have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than can fit in that 3-minute message, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. What were we talking about? We promised you at the end. This is why you should never tune out as you see us getting to the close. We promised you at the end the story of the orca salmon hats. Get thee toward the Times. Yeah, the Times from the United Kingdom. So you can read an excellent article by Rhys Blakely, the science correspondent there, who discovered, or reports on, I should say, the killer whale nostalgic practice of wearing dead salmon as hats. It's something that came back from the 1980s, and I think, given orca intelligence, there's a strong, disturbing argument that they're looking toward nostalgia as their population dwindles there in the Puget Sound. Do check it out and tell us everything else that's on your mind. We've got some crazy weird jokes we're going to share with you later in the week, so tune in to our listener mail. In the meantime, join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.